Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight. The bogus bloodbath story, that's the focus of tonight's angle. All right, aside from the Democrat machine raking in big money for the campaign, Joe Biden's had a rather lousy month. As much as the press tried to sell Biden's State of the Yell speech, it flopped. Didn't give him any bump in the polls, but it did remind everyone of their old uncle's reaction whenever someone tried to turn down the volume when he was watching Jeopardy. And this is the New York Times. Democrat voter registration is plummeting as well. Virtually every group of voters under 70 has become less likely to register as Democrats compared to Republicans since 2019. And even Biden's new choice in footwear tells a sad tale.
Are those sneakers? Yep, they're so-called lifestyle sneakers made by Hoka.
These are called the Hoka Transport, and as you can see, they look quite comfortable. They have a wide sole, no doubt great for stability, and the president does have a history of stumbling.
He suffers from sensory peripheral neuropathy in his feet.
Well, when your candidate has to wear the equivalent of orthopedic shoes because the staff is worried about his falling on his face, you know you kind of need to change the narrative fast. Well, to be accurate, it's pretty much the old narrative repackaged with a new word.
When he says the word bloodbath, he knows what he's doing, whether he means an economic bloodbath or something else. In the same speech, he is endorsing political violence.
If you look at the way he said this, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, then he stops. That's going to be the least of it. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
We are all desensitized and inured to the extraordinary, remarkable, and very, at times, un-American and threatening things that the former president is saying.
When he says bloodbath, he means it literally.
I mean, this was just preposterous. And former President Trump was railing against China's move into Mexico with auto manufacturing plants that crank out cheap EVs. Now, this is a point the Angle has raised repeatedly. China's goal isn't just to compete with U.S. car companies. Oh, no. Its goal is to put them out of business permanently. This would be cataclysmic to the United States.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
Now, anyone with a sixth grade understanding of the English language, minus woke indoctrination, would know that Trump was not calling for or predicting a civil war. It's ludicrous. But people who call themselves historians, but have turned into, before our very eyes, unhinged left-wing pundits, they can't help themselves.
However this election turns out, it will be. Americans were given the voluntary choice to become pawns in a dictatorship under a presidency of unimaginable brutality and violence. What I would suggest is let's go back to the late 1920s in Germany or the early 1930s. The Nazis and Hitler came to power under a legal system. They did not seize power overnight illegally. They were able to get elected, and one reason that happened was that people didn't realize that if you're voting for Hitler, this could end in the Holocaust and a defeat in World War II.
Okay, we've actually moved from talking about Chinese EVs to the Holocaust. It is actually so pathetic and insulting, and it's sad at this point. These people have become caricatures of themselves. I don't think they realize it. The drug companies really should abandon the COVID shot and come up with an injection for this anti-Trump virus. It's noxious. Obviously, if anyone is spurring on violence or stoking unrest before November, it's people like this.
This embrace of political violence, this dehumanizing language, this is what Donald Trump has been preaching for years. In January, he warned that there will be, quote, bedlam in this country if his criminal prosecution derailed his campaign. Late last year, he echoed the dehumanizing language of Adolf Hitler.
Okay. The boys and the girls in the media who cry wolf every day were almost instantly fact-checked, and in some cases by honest liberals who don't even like Trump and would never support him. MSNBC's resident Morning Joke deleted his nasty tweet after Elon Musk slammed him. But then he went back on a profanity-laced rampage earlier today.
He's talking about a bloodbath for America. It's laid out in the terms of it. And these idiots on Twitter, these idiots on cable news, these idiots on Sunday shows going, well, presidents, you know, he was talking only about the auto industry, and this is one more. It's just.
Now, I must have missed the part of debate class when swearing is a substitute for logic. It doesn't work. I'm like Joe now, I'm whispering. Now, what we saw over the weekend was the increasing power and influence of citizen journalists and the decreasing power of the corporate press. The left's hoaxes are piling up faster than Leo DiCaprio's 25-year-old former girlfriends. First, it was the Russia collusion hoax. Then the Charlottesville both sides hoax. Then the insurrection hoax about January 6th, and now the bloodbath hoax. This is just another in a long line of smears peddled by the same people who follow the same steps. So first, it's an outright lie or just a rank distortion of something usually Trump or another conservative says. Then the Biden campaign or a Biden surrogate picks up on the smear.
What I heard was a continuation of the same rhetoric, the same endorsement of political violence that we've seen from Donald Trump for years, as you pointed out. It goes even farther back, right? This is exactly who Donald Trump is, and this is exactly the threat that he poses to our democracy every single day.
And then the regime media repeats the White House or the surrogate or the, puppets. They're repeating it. Then over time, it gets repeated as gospel, with zero fact-checking. The original transcript, the truth, that gets deep-sixed in the process. It's the way they roll. But now, thanks to Elon Musk, we don't just have Fox to set the record straight, we have X. And with true press freedom, real facts become harder to bury or deny. Suddenly, there are thousands of fact-checkers in real time. If he had this type of uncensored, rapid response during COVID, maybe the lockdowns wouldn't have lasted so long in the blue states. But as we saw, the Branch Covidians rushed to silence medical voices posing important questions. Just look what happened to Martin Kulldorff at Harvard or Peter McCulloch at Baylor. Remember, the left doesn't seek honest dialogue. That era's long gone. That's over. They want to stoke your anger. They want to stoke resentment among others, and they want division. They always want division. And they'll stop at nothing to take down their opposition. The bloodbath hoax is a run-through for what the next 7 months will be like. Get ready. They'll say do anything, and they have unlimited funds to promote their lies. We have to keep rebutting them in real time. And as the anti-Trump hoaxes abound, so do the pro-Biden hoaxes. Now, my favorite new one is that President Biden is mad at his staff, who are holding him back. And that as he can't wait to get out on the campaign trail. Now, the story's meant to make Biden seem alert and even vigorous. Surrounded by protective aides who want to minimize the chances of a flub, the 81-year-old president has chafed at restraints that he sees as counter to his natural instincts as a retail politician. A third person familiar with the internal discussion said. He felt cocooned at times and has been eager to get out more, meet voters face to face, and take the fight directly to Trump, said the third person, and a fourth also familiar with the matter, who, like others, of course, spoke on the condition of anonymity. These types of stories, if you haven't figured it out yet, are always peddled by anonymous sources. Now, this is all the equivalent of reputation triage. Not only is Biden not out of it, he's on it.
He goes over word by word every piece of a speech, changing words, trying to make sure that he feels the message he is trying to convey will connect with American people.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine Biden with his red pen going over drafts meticulously? No, it's more like a purple crayon. Let's be clear. These stories are obviously lies, or they're just gross exaggerations planted by Biden's communications team to promote the notion that he's fit and he's ready to go.
We're going to take a few questions. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you so much. Thank you, press. Let's head back to the cars. Thank you. Back to the cars. Thank you. Thank you, press.
They should make that Biden's ringtone. Of course, he's failing. He's the opposite of fit, which is why they cannot risk another embarrassment, another debacle in front of the cameras. Can anyone imagine a real president like Clinton or Obama being prevented from campaigning however he wanted to campaign by his own staff? Can anyone imagine Trump being manipulated by his own people? No way. No real president is controlled by his staff. No real president chafes at restraints or feels cocooned. Real presidents tell their staff what to do, and real presidents fire staffers who don't do what they're told. Hey, Biden's not a real president, and he has no choice but to do what his staff says. They know he can't campaign, so they keep him locked up, and then they leak stories about how he's just eager, so eager to go back on the attack. It's both obvious and desperate, and we will call this out every time. There won't be any bloodbath, but there will be a lot of black eyes on the media folks who are selling these hoaxes. And that's The Angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.